In 1885, a London doctor made a decision based on a code he believed was infallible. A young woman suffered from chronic fatigue and sharp, unexplainable pains. Consulting the most advanced medical texts of his time, he delivered the diagnosis with absolute certainty: hysteria, a uniquely feminine malady of an emotional mind creating phantom illnesses. His prescription wasn't medicine, but a cage of forced rest and isolation. What this trusted code failed to see was a simple hormonal imbalance we now easily identify. For her, this single, flawed interpretation was a life sentence. This story is not an artifact of a bygone era. It is a chilling example of a systemic failure that echoes in the present. We place our faith in modern science, believing we have corrected the errors of the past and that our health is governed by objective truth. But what if the very foundation of what we know about the female body is fundamentally flawed? What if the code we use to interpret its signals is not just incomplete, but corrupted with fictions designed for control, passed down as fact? We are about to dismantle 5 of these foundational lies. These are not minor misconceptions. They are deeply embedded untruths that dictate everything from medical diagnoses to daily advice. They form the invisible bars of a modern cage, influencing millions who don't even know they're confined by a script written centuries ago. We will expose how these myths were constructed, who benefits from their persistence, and the devastating cost of believing them. This is about more than correcting the record. It's about reclaiming a fundamental biological truth. To do this, we must unearth a body of knowledge that was systematically discredited and suppressed. This isn't conspiracy theory. It is a documented history of scientific pathways not taken and inconvenient data being buried. For generations, entire fields of study that offered a different perspective on female biology were labeled unscientific because they challenged an established male order. We will follow the trail back in time to rediscover the suppressed code, a key that unlocks not only these 5 lies, but a more accurate way of seeing the human body. Our journey begins with the most pervasive myth of all, the one that allowed that doctor to ruin a life without a second thought. It's the foundational lie that female biology is intrinsically linked to emotional instability, the ancient myth of the unpredictable, the irrational, the hysterical. Before we can deconstruct the other 4 lies, we must first shatter the cornerstone upon which they were all built, the dangerous fiction that you cannot trust the signals from your own body, because your emotions have already betrayed you. To understand this first great lie, we must travel back to ancient Greece, to a word born from fear and misunderstanding. Hystera, the Greek word for uterus. From this, the diagnosis of hysteria was forged. The prevailing belief, held by the most respected physicians of the time, was that a woman's womb was a restless creature. If deprived of its purpose, it could detach, wandering throughout the body, pressing against organs and wreaking havoc. It was thought to cause everything from anxiety and shortness of breath to irritability and passionate outbursts. This wasn't just a medical theory. It was a foundation, a narrative that a woman's body was inherently unstable, its very core capable of betraying her mind. This ancient myth proved dangerously resilient. Fast forward 2 millennia to the Victorian era, where hysteria became the perfect weapon to enforce conformity. The diagnosis was a catch-all, a convenient label for any woman who dared to step outside her prescribed role. Was she intellectually ambitious? Hysterical. Did she challenge her husband's authority? Hysterical. Did she express strong emotions, or worse, a lack of them? All were symptoms. It was a tool not of healing, but of silencing. An argument rooted in sound logic could be dismissed as a neurological malfunction. A passionate plea for justice could be reframed as a symptom of a wandering womb. The message was clear and devastating. A woman's emotional landscape was a sign of disease, and her logic was merely a symptom. But modern neuroscience tells a radically different story. Through the lens of functional magnetic resonance imaging, we can now watch the brain think and feel in real time. And what we've discovered dismantles the ancient lie completely. The prefrontal cortex, the supposed seat of cold, hard logic, and the limbic system, the brain's emotional core, are not at war. They are partners in a constant, intricate dance. Neuroscientists like Antonio Damasio have shown that without emotional input, our ability to make rational decisions collapses. Emotion isn't the enemy of logic. It is the data that logic needs to function effectively. This integration is a marvel of biological engineering. Emotional responses act as a high-speed filtration system, flagging crucial information and potential dangers long before our conscious, logical mind has time to process the raw data. That gut feeling, that flash of intuition so often dismissed as feminine sentimentality, is in fact a sophisticated form of rapid-fire cognitive assessment. It is the brain's emotional centers feeding vital, pre-analyzed intelligence to the executive functions. What was once pathologized as a weakness is, in reality, a highly efficient system for navigating a complex world, a system where feeling and thinking are two sides of the same powerful coin. So we must ask a critical question. If this deeply integrated emotional logic was systematically mislabeled as a disease, if it was suppressed, shamed, and medicated for centuries, where did it go? It didn't simply vanish. Power, when suppressed, rarely disappears. It transforms. It was forced to operate in the shadows, to become a subconscious current of perception. The very act of trying to extinguish this faculty may have inadvertently honed it into something else entirely, a hidden strength forged in the fires of dismissal. This so-called illness was not an illness at all, but a form of intelligence that was simply not understood. And that begs the next question. What happens when this power is finally reclaimed? This suppressed power, born from the ashes of the hysteria myth, has a name we all recognize yet fundamentally misunderstand. Intuition, that gut feeling, that unexplainable certainty a situation is wrong or a person can't be trusted. For centuries, it was dismissed as emotional fantasy. But what if that sixth sense wasn't a sense at all, but a form of computation so rapid it operates beneath our conscious awareness? Science is now discovering this internal voice isn't a whisper from another realm, but a survival mechanism honed to detect invisible threats hidden in plain sight. The common myth paints intuition as mystical, a PSYC, hit gift. The reality is far more biological. Your brain is a relentless data machine, constantly scanning your environment. While your conscious mind focuses on words, your subconscious processes terabytes of nonverbal data. The flicker of a microexpression, a subtle shift in vocal pitch, a change in posture. It's a supercomputer running a silent, high-speed analysis, comparing every new data point against a vast library of past experiences. That gut feeling is simply the final report from this analysis, delivered not as a spreadsheet, but as a powerful, undeniable sensation. Here, the historical irony is profound. The very brain regions once blamed for emotional instability, the amygdala and the insular cortex, are the precise engines of this incredible processing power. These areas aren't simply seats of fear. They are masters of rapid pattern recognition and social intelligence. Enhanced connectivity in these regions, often more pronounced in the female brain, allows for a faster, more integrated assessment of social cues. What was pathologized as too emotional is a neurological architecture for a superior ability to read a room, detect deception, and understand unspoken truths. The supposed weakness was the superpower all along. Consider a high-stakes negotiation. You get an inexplicable urge to walk away from a deal that looks perfect on paper. Logic says sign, but your gut says run. This isn't a random impulse. It's your subconscious flagging invisible inconsistencies. It detected the negotiator's smile didn't reach their eyes. It registered a micro delay before answering a key question, indicating cognitive load or deception. It processed their feet angled toward the door, a primal desire to exit. Each clue is small, but together, they form a mosaic of deception presented as a single, clear warning from your intuition. This ability to perceive truth beneath the surface is a formidable evolutionary advantage, a biological lie detector built over millennia, a finely tuned instrument for navigating our complex social world. But what if this extraordinary system, this dance between observation and subconscious analysis, could be systematically sabotaged from within? What if a predictable biological cycle, misunderstood for thousands of years, periodically throws this system into disarray? A recurring phenomenon that doesn't just dull this intuitive edge, but can actively turn against you, making you misread the very signals you evolved to decode. That biological cycle, we're told, sabotages logic. For centuries, it's been the ultimate proof of female instability, a monthly hormonal storm rendering a woman unreliable. This narrative is so ingrained, It's accepted as fact, but the story is a lie. It's a deliberate mischaracterization of a sophisticated biological system. The menstrual cycle isn't a bug in the female operating system. It's a feature. It is a dynamic, adaptive superpower that optimizes the brain for different modes of thinking and performance, week by week, granting unique cognitive flexibility. Consider the follicular phase as estrogen climbs. This isn't a prelude to chaos. It's the brain entering a high-performance state for strategic planning. Studies show rising estrogen correlates with increased verbal fluency, sharper memory, and enhanced fine motor skills. The brain builds new synaptic connections, becoming more open to new ideas and adept at complex problem solving. This is a biological system upgrade, priming the mind for innovation and outward engagement, a period of peak cognitive expansion and creativity. Then comes the peak, ovulation. A surge of estrogen and testosterone transforms the brain's mode again. This is an emotional vulnerability. It's a phase of maximum execution. Cognitive and social skills are at their zenith. Women in this phase consistently perform better in negotiation and communication, their confidence measurably higher. Physical performance is also enhanced, with studies on elite athletes showing increased strength. This is a system at full power, optimized for action, and achieving goals with stunning efficiency. As the body enters the luteal phase, progesterone rises, and the narrative shifts to dreaded PMS. But the myth obscures a function. This hormonal shift doesn't create irrationality. It changes cognitive focus from outward expansion to inward analysis. The brain becomes more detail-oriented, critical, and attuned to spotting flaws in a system or an argument. It's a period designed for introspection, finishing tasks, and perfecting. That infamous low tolerance for nonsense isn't a flaw. It's a feature of a brain focused on accuracy, cutting away what isn't working. So you see, it's not one unpredictable state, but a four-act play of cognitive specialization, creative expansion, execution, critical refinement, and rest. This is no handicap. It's a profound strategic advantage. A mind that cycles through modes of peak performance is an incredibly powerful tool. The question is not why this cycle exists, but why this biological weapon, capable of adapting strategy monthly, was so successfully branded a liability. It wasn't just misunderstood, it was feared, and the campaign to pathologize it hides a truth they never wanted us to discover. This fundamental misunderstanding of our internal biology bleeds directly into an even greater myth, the myth of natural submission. We have been sold a story where assertiveness and competition are masculine traits, while women are inherently passive, more suited to nurturing than to navigating the battlefield of life. But this narrative is built on a dangerously narrow definition of conflict. It presumes that the only valid form of competition is overt, aggressive, and physical, a head-on collision for dominance. This view conveniently ignores the far more intricate and often more effective game being played just beneath the surface, a game of strategic social architecture. When anthropologists study primate societies and early human groups, they don't find an absence of female competition. They find a different kind of competition. Instead of direct physical challenges, the contest is for social capital. It's a subtle, high-stakes chess match for status, influence, and access to the best resources and mates. The primary weapons in this arena are not fists, but alliances. The goal is not to vanquish an opponent in a single blow, but to strategically isolate them, to build a coalition so strong that your position becomes unassailable. This indirect aggression, focused on reputation and social exclusion, is every bit as ruthless and competitive as its male counterpart. This strategy is not a sign of weakness. It is an evolutionary masterstroke. For a female in our ancestral past, engaging in direct physical conflict was a catastrophic risk. An injury could mean death, not just for her, but for any dependent offspring. Therefore, evolution favored different. T-path, the path of the social engineer. The ability to read social cues, to forge powerful friendships, to identify trustworthy allies, and to subtly undermine rivals without risking open warfare became the paramount survival skill. This wasn't about being nice. It was about being intelligent, calculating, and ruthlessly efficient in a different kind of war. Here, the very definition of assertiveness is turned on its head. In this framework, cooperation is not the opposite of competition. It is its most sophisticated tool. Building a strong, reciprocal alliance is one of the most assertive moves a person can make. It's a declaration of value, a strategic investment, and a protective fortress all at once. The woman who can rally a group, who can mediate disputes to her advantage, and who can create a network of mutual support is not passive. She is a power broker, wielding a form of influence that is often invisible to those looking only for a fistfight. So we must ask, if this powerful, cooperative, competitive strategy is so deeply ingrained in our evolutionary history, why has it been so completely written out of our modern understanding of power and ambition? Why is a woman who builds coalition seen as simply collaborative, while a man who does the same is a strategic leader? The answer reveals a deliberate effort to invalidate this form of power, to label it as secondary or worse, manipulative. It's a system designed to ensure that only one type of competition, the most visible and often the most reckless, is ever truly rewarded. From the subtle alliances we just explored, we pivot to a more visceral battlefield, the body itself. Here, the most persistent myth takes root, the idea of female fragility, codified into belief that women have a lower tolerance for pain. It's a whisper in emergency rooms, an assumption in drug trials, a trope of the delicate damsel. This narrative feels like an immutable law. But what if this law is a carefully constructed illusion? What if the system designed perceived pain is also engineered for a level of endurance that science is only now beginning to comprehend, an endurance systematically misinterpreted for centuries? To dismantle this, we must understand the language of pain. Science distinguishes between pain threshold and pain tolerance. The threshold is the minimum point a sensation is registered as painful. Some studies suggest this trigger point is slightly lower in women, a fact often weaponized to support the fragility myth. But this is a misdirection, focusing on the spark while ignoring the inferno. Pain tolerance is the maximum level of pain one can endure. And here, in the realm of endurance, the narrative collapses. Tolerance isn't just physical. It's a complex interplay of psychology, hormones, and neurological conditioning, a testament to resilience, not weakness. There is no greater testament to this resilience than childbirth. It is an event of such physiological extremity. It operates at the limits of human endurance. For millennia, this experience has been the ultimate crucible, a process that doesn't just test the body's limits, but fundamentally rewires them. Neurological studies show that the intense pain of labor actively remodels the brain's pain processing networks, creating new pathways. It's a form of extreme biological conditioning that permanently elevates pain tolerance. This isn't just getting through it. It's a neurological upgrade, leaving the system more robust and capable of enduring future stressors. This reprogramming extends beyond a single event. Consider the silent reality of chronic pain, which disproportionately affects women. Conditions like fibromyalgia and migraines create a state of constant neurological siege. Yet, instead of breaking, the system adapts. Women with chronic pain develop sophisticated coping mechanisms, increasing their functional pain tolerance to a level that would incapacitate others. Their nervous systems learn to operate within a storm, filtering signals that would be overwhelming to an unconditioned system. This is a sign of a flawed system, but of one demonstrating a profound capacity for adaptation against all odds. The myth of lower pain tolerance is thus exposed as a dangerous fiction. It's a tool of medical paternalism, an excuse to dismiss legitimate suffering as emotionality. By focusing on a lower initial threshold, the system has justified undertreating female pain for generations, creating cycles of medical gaslighting. The scientific truth, however, paints a radically different picture. It reveals a nervous system not built for fragility, but for immense endurance, a system neurologically reforged by childbirth and conditioned by chronic illness. The real story isn't about lower tolerance. It's about a capacity for endurance that has been intentionally overlooked. We've explored the architecture of cooperation and the body's hidden threshold for pain, but these are echoes of a deeper conversation, a dialogue happening constantly within the 3 pounds of tissue that defines us. We return now to the most fundamental myth, the supposed chasm between reason and emotion. For centuries, we've been told there are warring factions, that a logical mind is one scrubbed clean of feeling. This is a profound, lazy misunderstanding of the brain's genius. It mistakes a complex symphony for a simple duel, Ignoring the very structures that prove this division is illusion. Neuroscientists have long studied the corpus callosum, the dense bundle of nerve fibers connecting the brain's hemispheres. It is the grand central station of thought. While variations exist in every individual, research points to a greater density of connections in this structure within the average female brain. This isn't a statement of superiority, but of a different wiring schematic. It suggests a higher bandwidth for crosstalk, a more constant, fluid exchange between the so-called logical left and emotional right hemispheres. This isn't a bug in the system. It is a feature of a different kind of operating system. So what does this constant, high-speed dialogue produce? A cognition that is not less logical, but more holistic. Imagine a decision based only on a spreadsheet. Now imagine one that also integrates team morale, market sentiment, and consumer trust. This second approach isn't illogical. It's radically more informed. The brain's interconnected architecture often facilitates this by default, treating emotional data, information about human states, as a crucial variable in the logical equation. Emotion is not the enemy of logic. It is an indispensable dataset, enriching the calculation rather than corrupting it. This integrated processing manifests as what we often mislabel intuition. It isn't magic. It's high-speed data synthesis. It's the ability to read nonverbal cues in a negotiation, sense friction in a team, or anticipate a child's needs before they are voiced. These are not emotional overreactions. They're conclusions drawn from a wider pool of information, where social patterns are weighted as heavily as hard numbers. This decision-making model is less a straight line and more a complex web. Catching nuances that a purely linear process would miss entirely. The true flaw was never in the brain's processing, but in our narrow definition of logic. We create a caricature of a cold, unfeeling machine and criticize those who didn't fit. So I ask you, think of a time your gut feeling saved you from making a purely logical mistake. Share that story in the comments. You'll likely find you weren't abandoning logic. You were accessing a more advanced version. One that understands that in the complex world of human interaction, the most logical data we have is often how we feel. This phenomenon isn't magic. It's a high-speed, parallel processing system running silently in the background of our consciousness. Neuroscientists often point to specific regions, like the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex, as the command centers for this operation. These areas act as a sophisticated integration hub, constantly receiving a deluge of sensory information, sights, sounds, and subtle environmental cues that our conscious mind simply doesn't have the bandwidth to process. It is a tireless sentinel, scanning for patterns, for deviations from the norm, for anything that feels even slightly off. This is the brain's deep-seated alarm system, one that doesn't need our permission to sound the alert, translating vast amounts of raw data into a single, powerful feeling, a gut instinct. This subconscious scanning is a masterclass in detecting the imperceptible. It registers a flicker of a micro-expression on someone's face that lasts less than a fraction of a second, the slight hesitation in their voice that betrays their confident words, or the unnatural stillness in a room that should be bustling with life. While the conscious, logical mind is busy analyzing the explicit conversation or the main event, this deeper system is reading the subtext. It's comparing this flood of new, subtle data against a lifetime of stored experiences and learned patterns. When a mismatch occurs, when someone's body language contradicts their words, or a situation doesn't align with safe, predictable models, the system flags it, sending a powerful neurochemical signal that we interpret as intuition or a sudden sense of dread. Consider the countless stories of individuals who have sidestepped disaster based on nothing more than a bad feeling. The woman who felt an overwhelming urge to leave a party, only to learn later of a structural collapse at the venue. Or the experienced firefighter who orders his team out of a burning building moments before the roof caves in, unable to explain why, but certain of the imminent danger. These aren't lucky guesses. They're the product of a brain that detected subtle sounds, a change in air pressure, or minute vibrations that the conscious mind dismissed as insignificant. If you've ever had a moment like this, a gut feeling that turned out to be right, hit that like button and share your story in the comments. The sheer volume of these experiences points to a universal human capability. This powerful mechanism is a direct inheritance from our evolutionary past. For our ancestors navigating a world filled with predators and hidden dangers, the ability to make rapid, life-or-death judgments based on incomplete information was not a luxury. It was a fundamental survival tool. There was no time for a lengthy, logical debate when a shadow moved in the periphery. The brain evolved to favor a better safe than sorry protocol, a fast-track system that bypasses the slower, more deliberate conscious mind to trigger an immediate fight-or-flight response. This ancient, hardwired system remains fully operational today, a primal guardian watching over us in a modern world, constantly assessing threats we don't even know exist. Ultimately, this process reveals profound truth about decision-making. Pure logic is powerful, but is also slow and data-hungry. It requires clear, verifiable inputs to function effectively. Intuition, however, thrives in ambiguity. It operates on the whispers of data, the fragment of information that slip through the cracks of our awareness. It is the brain's way of making an educated guess when the stakes are high and time is short. This subconscious isn't an enemy of logic. It's a vital partner, an early warning system that flags potential dangers, allowing our conscious mind to then focus its powerful analytical resources where they're needed most, often saving us long before we even realize we are in peril. And just as the mind scans for external patterns, the body operates on an internal, cyclical blueprint. This rhythm has long been dismissed as a source of unpredictable behavior, a liability in a world demanding linear output. But this perception is a profound misreading. This isn't chaos. It's a sophisticated, predictable code, a monthly optimization algorithm that, once deciphered, unlocks distinct cognitive superpowers at specific intervals. This isn't about managing a weakness. It's about learning the advanced operating system you were born with, a framework that synchronizes with biology for peak performance. The cycle begins with the follicular phase, a cognitive spring. As estrogen steadily climbs, so does mental energy, creativity, and optimism. This is the brain's designated time for new beginnings. Neural pathways are primed for learning and generating novel ideas. It's the biological green light for brainstorming, mapping out ambitious projects, and tackling problems that require innovative solutions. During this window, the mind is forward-looking and uniquely receptive to possibility. To waste this phase is to ignore your most powerful creative surge, a biological gift for innovation that arrives with clockwork precision. Next is the ovulatory peak, the system's high watermark. With estrogen at its zenith, verbal and social skills become supercharged. Communication flows effortlessly, articulation is sharp, and the ability to connect is profoundly enhanced. This is the phase of maximum outward expression, the optimal time for critical negotiations, delivering a keynote speech, or navigating a difficult conversation requiring empathy and clarity. The brain is literally wired for connection and influence during this brief window. It is a strategic moment to engage with the world and make your most important social and professional moves. Following this peak, the luteal phase initiates a strategic shift inward. As progesterone rises, it brings a calming, grounding influence. The expansive energy recedes, replaced by a focused, detail-oriented mindset. This is the biological cue to turn from creation to completion. It's the perfect time for deep focus work, for editing, organizing systems, and bringing projects across the finish line. The desire for social engagement may wane, but the capacity for sustained concentration and analytical rigor intensifies. This phase is not a decline. It's a necessary pivot to execute the brilliant plans conceived earlier. Finally, the menstrual phase arrives, culturally framed as a time of weakness. Cognitively, it is a period of profound insight and strategic review. With hormone levels at their lowest, the barriers between the conscious and subconscious mind become more permeable, allowing intuition to speak with startling clarity. This is a time for evaluation, for seeing what is truly working and what is not in projects, relationships, and life. It's the body's built-in reset, a moment to shed what no longer serves you and gain the wisdom needed to begin the next cycle with greater purpose. But mastering our internal biology is only half the equation. We must also navigate the external world, an ecosystem governed by a hidden rule book. This brings us to the arena of competition, where a damaging myth persists that women are not competitive. This is a simple error. It's a failure to recognize a different strategic language. The game of advancement isn't a straightforward climb. It's a complex board where the most important moves are often invisible. The dialect of power has been standardized, and those who speak differently are simply not heard. The myth thrives because it defines competition in a singular way: the zero-sum aggressive clash. It expects a gladiator, and finding a network builder registers nothing. Female competitive drive is often channeled not into defeating an opponent, but into elevating a project to its absolute peak, a competition against mediocrity itself. This approach, focused on long-term collaborative success over short-term individual wins, is incredibly potent. Yet, in a system that measures ambition by the sharpness of one's elbows, this intricate strategy is rendered invisible, mistaken for a lack of will to win. This disconnect has devastating consequences, particularly in negotiations. The system is primed to reward a direct, almost combative demand for more, a language it equates with confidence. When a woman frames a request around mutual benefit and long-term value, her logic is just as sound, but the delivery is foreign. The system doesn't hear strategic partner, it hears hesitation. Consequently, she is often undervalued, not for a lack of skill, but for speaking a dialect of power that the gatekeepers were never trained to comprehend or respect. This same pattern dictates promotions and leadership roles. The corporate world traditionally rewards the loudest voice, the person who most aggressively claims credit for a shared success. The collaborative competitor, who builds consensus and shares the spotlight to ensure a better team outcome, is systemically overlooked. Their vital contributions become diffused, invisible to a structure searching for a singular hero. They are playing a brilliant game of chess, while the judges are only capable of scoring a boxing match. Every strategic, subtle move is completely missed. Ultimately, the issue isn't a deficiency in ambition, but a profound flaw in our very definition of it. The game has been rigged, not with malice, but with a narrow-mindedness that only recognizes one style of play. This forces a critical question. Why should one form of strategic drive be the sole gold standard? The challenge isn't to force women to adopt a foreign language of aggression. It is to dismantle the flawed and outdated premise that there is only one way to compete and only one way to win. But beyond the silent rules of social power lies a far more intimate and invisible battle, one fought within the very wiring of the nervous system. We think of pain as a universal language, a straightforward signal of damage. A cut is a cut, a burn is a burn. Yet, this is perhaps one of the most profound misunderstandings in modern medicine. What if pain itself is not a constant, but a variable, profoundly altered by a biological code that science has only just begun to decipher? What if the experience of agony, the very definition of suffering, is fundamentally different for half the population, operating under a set of rules that have been ignored for centuries, creating a silent epidemic of misunderstood and untreated torment? This isn't a question of tolerance or strength. It's a question of biology. The key to this enigma lies in the hormonal symphony that governs the female body. Estrogen and progesterone are not merely reproductive agents. They are powerful neuromodulators that directly influence how the brain perceives and processes pain. Think of them as volume dials on the body's alarm system. At certain points in the menstrual cycle, high levels of estrogen can act as a natural analgesic, dampening pain signals and providing a higher threshold for discomfort. But when these levels plummet, as they do just before menstruation, that protective effect vanishes. The volume is cranked up and nerve endings become hypersensitive. This hormonal fluctuation is why conditions like migraines, TMJ, and irritable bowel syndrome can flare up with cyclical predictability, turning the body's own rhythm into a recurring source of affliction. For the vast majority of the 20th century, medical science chose to ignore this complexity entirely. The default human subject in preclinical and clinical pain research was overwhelmingly male. From the lab rat to the human volunteer, the male model was considered the standard, the uncomplicated baseline. Scientists actively excluded female subjects, arguing that their fluctuating hormonal cycles would introduce too many variables and contaminate the data. In a staggering act of scientific irony, the very biological system that defines the pain experience for billions was deemed too inconvenient to study. The result was a mountain of knowledge built on a faulty foundation, a universal theory of pain derived from only half of the human experience, leaving the other half in the dark. The consequences of this historical oversight have been devastating and are felt in doctors' offices every single day. Conditions that predominantly affect women, like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and certain autoimmune disorders, remain medical mysteries for decades because they didn't present with the clear, localized markers of injury seen in male-centric models. The pain was often dismissed. It was labeled as psychosomatic, emotional, or, in the most insulting of terms, hysterical. Women were told their debilitating, body-wide pain was all in their head simply because the tools and understanding, built from a male blueprint, were incapable of seeing it. This wasn't just neglect. It was a systemic gaslighting of female suffering, codified in medical textbooks and clinical practice. O'Day, the tide is slowly turning. Researchers are now scrambling to understand the unique pathways of the female nervous system, designing studies that account for hormonal cycles and sex-specific responses to medication. But this new frontier is haunted by the ghosts of the past. We are only now realizing that many common painkillers are demonstrably less effective in women, and that dosages and treatment plans may need to be radically different. The enigma of female pain is not that it is inherently mysterious, but that we willfully chose not to look. The question that remains is a chilling one. How many millions of lives have been diminished? How much potential has been lost to a pain that medicine, for generations, simply refused to believe was real? We have spent our time pulling apart these threads one by one, examining each myth in isolation. But that is the most clever part of the illusion. These are not separate lies. They're interlocking gears in a single, complex machine. The myth of the logical male brain, the hysterical woman, the maternal instinct, the non-competitive nature, and the enigmatic nervous system. They are not 5 stories, but 5 chapters of the same book. A book written to justify a foregone conclusion. This is a great synthesis, where the unified lie is finally revealed. Consider how the emotional female brain myth props up the non-competitive woman myth. If a woman is perceived as governed by irrational feelings, her different approach to negotiation isn't a strategy, it's a weakness. Her collaborative style isn't a powerful tool, but proof she lacks the killer instinct for leadership. The first myth provides a scientific justification for the social observations of the second. One becomes the explanation for the other in a perfect, self-reinforcing loop of corporate folklore, making the bias seem like a natural outcome of biology. Now, connect the historical specter of hysteria with a modern paradox of female pain. For centuries, any unexplained ailment in a woman was dismissed as a product of a fragile mind. This wasn't just a historical error. It laid the foundation for medical neglect. When science began studying pain, the female nervous system was already branded as unreliable, too complicated by hormones to be a clean subject. The dismissal of her pain as being her head is a direct echo of the hysteria diagnosis, a modern update to an ancient prejudice. And holding it all together is the master key, the myth of the all-powerful maternal instinct. This idea serves as a universal excuse to explain away any deviation from the male standard. Why is her pain threshold different? It's for childbirth. Why are her emotional responses more varied? It's her reproductive cycle. Why is she less driven for a promotion? Her true biological purpose lies elsewhere. This myth acts as a narrative gravity, pulling all other observations into its orbit and preventing deeper, more complex questions from being asked. So you see, it was never about 5 individual myths. It was about creating one cohesive story where each element reinforces the others, making the whole structure seem unassailable. To question why women are underrepresented in leadership, you must fight the myth of their emotional brains. To demand better healthcare, you have to dismantle the legacy of hysteria. Each lie serves as a guard for the others. This is not a collection of random errors. It is a system, a singular, elegant, and profoundly damaging untruth. This unified lie, this fortress of flawed assumptions, could not stand forever. Cracks began to appear not from a seismic event, but from a persistent work of individuals who saw the emperor had no clothes. These were researchers, often women, who experienced the system's failures firsthand. They saw the unexplainable diagnoses, the dismissed pain, and the one-size-fits-all treatments, and refused to accept them. They began asking forbidden questions. Not just what if we're wrong, but what if the entire foundation upon which our knowledge is built is fundamentally flawed? Consider the battle over cardiovascular health. For decades, the male model of heart attack was the only one taught. It took the relentless work of researchers like Dr. C. Noel Barrymers to prove that women's symptoms, fatigue, nausea, jaw pain, weren't atypical. They were, in fact, typical for half the population. Her team didn't just publish a paper. They waged a campaign against institutional inertia, forcing the medical community to confront the deadly consequences of its ignorance. Every data point was a battle against a dogma that was costing lives. A similar revolution was happening in neuroscience. While the world focused on plaques and tangles, Dr. Lisa Mosconi's brain imaging studies revealed a shocking link between menopause and Alzheimer's risk. She showed that the hormonal shifts long dismissed as mere emotional side effects were profound neurological events that reshaped the female brain. This wasn't a new variable. It was a new paradigm. The hysterical female mind was finally being understood as an exquisitely sensitive system responding to powerful, predictable hormonal signals that had been willfully ignored for over a century. But here lies the most unsettling twist in the scientific reckoning. As these modern pioneers fought to have their discoveries accepted, an echo emerged from the past. The new understanding of cyclical hormonal impacts, the recognition of different pain presentations, the importance of diet in managing female conditions. None of it was truly new. This knowledge had existed for centuries, held by midwives, herbalists, and in traditions of women's medicine. It was knowledge systematically dismantled, discredited, and buried during the rise of a purely mechanistic medicine, dismissed as unscientific folklore or old wives' tales. This wasn't a simple case of ignorance. It was a deliberate suppression. The knowledge was not lost. It was discarded. The current reckoning, therefore, is not a journey of pure discovery, but one of reclamation. The work of today's researchers is an act of scientific archaeology, digging up truths intentionally buried under layers of bias. They are proving, with the rigorous tools of modern science, what generations of women already knew in their bones. The ultimate challenge wasn't just to add women to the data, but to admit the original equation was willfully and dangerously wrong. And so, we emerge in a labyrinth of myths, not with a map, but with the tools to be our own cartographers. This journey was never about debunking 5 lies. It was about dismantling an entire architecture of misunderstanding, built to obscure a fundamental truth. Your body is not a mystery to be solved, but a language to be learned. The science that was suppressed and the knowledge that was dismissed is not ancient history. It is your operating system, finally recovered and ready for a reboot. It's the user manual that should have been yours from the very beginning. This is the essence of the electric body. It isn't a metaphor. It is a biological reality. Every hormonal signal, every neural pathway, every gut feeling is a transmission of critical data. The myth of the wandering womb was a failure to understand the feedback loop between the uterus and the brain. The dismissal of severe pain was a refusal to listen to the body's most urgent alarm system. The hysteria diagnosis was a misinterpretation of a nervous system under duress. We are not unpredictable machines. We are finely tuned biological systems. The static was never in the signal. It was in the receiver. With this understanding, you now hold the pen. You can begin rewriting your own manual, one based not on outdated assumptions, but on your direct experience, validated by this deeper science. You're no longer a passive passenger in a vessel you don't understand. You are the pilot, equipped with a dashboard of biofeedback that has been there all along. This knowledge empowers you to ask better questions, to have more compassion for yourself, and to trust the subtle whispers of your own physiology before they are forced to become screams of pain or illness. This personal revolution has a collective echo. When we stop seeing the female body as a deviation from a default, the entire landscape of human health and psychology shifts. We recontextualize generations of misdiagnosed suffering, not as weakness, but as a testament to incredible resilience against systemic ignorance. The narrative is no longer one of inherent flaws, but a profound adaptation. We are not solving a problem. We are finally appreciating an intricate and powerful design that was never broken in the first place. You are not a faulty product. You are a masterpiece of evolution. But what happens when the body's signals are not just misunderstood, but are the result of experiences the mind has tried to forget? The body keeps a perfect record, and sometimes its language is not biology, but biography. The echoes of our past are becoming encoded in our present, hiding in plain sight as harmless habits. In our next investigation, we decode these signals, revealing the hidden signs of trauma that manifest in common behaviors. To continue this journey of understanding, subscribe now and activate all notifications. The most important stories are the ones your body is waiting to tell you.